Hello there, this is Doug Rumbaugh, and welcome to the third episode in my Introduction to Command Line video series. In the previous episode, we discussed a variety of programs that we can use to access and manipulate text data stored within files. We saw things like type and notepad and that sort of thing. However, we did leave out a very significant piece of the puzzle. And to demonstrate exactly what this piece is, I'm going to give a quick example of where the stuff that we've already discussed is not actually sufficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Notepad and create a text file. We'll just call it, I don't know, example.txt. But I'm going to do something a little bit different. So notice I didn't specify a file name here when I ran Notepad, so I just have a blank untitled document. So I can go ahead and throw some example text in here. And now when I go to save this file, I'm going to get my save as pop-up opening up, and I type the file name in here. We didn't see this in the last episode because in that video we always specified the name of a file. But here the file doesn't have a name, so we have to tell the computer what that name is. And I'm going to go ahead and just save it right here in my documents folder. We'll call it example.txt. So our file is now saved. Leaning on the content we discussed last time then, if I wanted to see this sentence on my terminal, what I would have to do is run the type command followed by the name of the file, so type example.txt. And based on what we saw last time, we would expect for this to work. However, it doesn't. The system can't find the file specified. So what's the problem here? This file definitely exists. It's right here. In fact, if I go and do a file save as, we can see it. It's sitting right there. So it's not that the file doesn't exist. There's something else that's going wrong here. What this issue is that we actually were not specific enough when we ran the type command. Consider this example. I've opened up File Explorer here, and I just navigated back to local disk C. So we're looking at my C drive. You can see these folders: C users, perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing of where we're going with this. But if we don't specify where a file is located, that means that the computer needs to search for it, right? So if I wanted to search my computer for this example.txt file, when I run this search, it's not an instantaneous process, right? It's going to take some amount of time in order to locate this file on the computer. Beyond this, you probably know that you can actually have multiple files with the same name. I could have several example.txts on my computer, so long as they're in different folders, right? Which means that when I reference a file on my command prompt, I actually need to specify where the file is located. I need to specify what's called the path name for that file. Now I hear you ask, we didn't do any of this. We didn't specify any path names last time. All we did is specify the file name, and that was enough. As we're going to see, there are two types of path names. In fact, this thing is still looking. There are two types of path names. There's the absolute path name and the relative path name. We're going to discuss both. The relative path name is the reason why all the stuff from the last video actually worked. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's start with the simplest form, which is the absolute path name. We know that this example.txt file is located inside of my documents folder. So rather than saying type example.txt, let's do this instead. I'm going to say c:/users/doug/documents. So this is what's called the path to my file. It's the list of successive directories inside of which my file is nested. I'll click through this in File Explorer in just a moment to show you what that looks like. And then once we have specified the path, I specify the file name at the end. So this is the path this is the file name, and this entire thing taken together is called the absolute path name for the file. And now, when I run type, it works. Now again, just to demonstrate what this actually means, let's go ahead and pop open File Explorer again, and I'll go to the C drive and we can take a look at it. Okay, so here I am. In File Explorer, you can see what directory's contents you're looking at right here up in this address bar. So this says C:/, and so we're looking inside of the C drive. And as you can see, my C drive, local disk C, has a folder called users. So let's open that up. And now you can see we have Doug. So let's open up Doug. And then on to documents. And there's my file. So this C:/users/Doug/documents/example.txt is directions on how to get to your file in question from C:/, the what's called the root drive on the system. On Windows, you have multiple roots. Every hard disk partition or whatever is a root. On Linux, you only have one root. So it's a little bit more complicated on Windows. Unless you have multiple hard drives or whatever plugged into your computer, good odds everything's going to be starting with C. Anywho, that is absolute path. I hope that makes sense. So your absolute path name here contains a directory, and then this backslash is the directory separator. We use it to split up components in a path. Note, it is a backslash, not a forward slash. Forward slashes will not work. So we have C:/users/Doug, documents, and then finally the file. And that is an absolute path name. As I'm sure you can imagine, typing this for every single file that you want to access is going to become a royal pain. And so there's a workaround. And this is how we were able to run all of those commands in the previous episode with only the file name. The idea is we have something called a relative path name as opposed to an absolute one. So absolute path names are specified as, you can think of it as the sequence of directions to get to the file from the root drive of the system. So you go all the way to the beginning and go step by step until you get to the file from there. Relative path names work a little bit differently in that they take this starting point and they shift it. So rather than going all the way back to the root drive and giving me step-by-step instructions, for a relative path name, we go all the way back to something called the working directory and give step-by-step instructions from there. So what is a working directory? Well, the working directory is actually a special property that all programs running on your computer have. It's easiest to see, again, in File Explorer. So File Explorer has a working directory, and File Explorer displays the working directory right here in the address bar. So right now, the working directory on File Explorer is C:/users/Doug. And if I want to, I can go up to Doug, and I've just changed my working directory. And as you can see, this panel here in File Explorer shows you the contents of whatever your working directory happens to be. If I want to open up a file in File Explorer, I have to go to the directory containing that file. So I have to make my working directory the same as the directory with the file, and then I can click on it. This should all be fairly familiar if you've used a computer before. The same exact principles apply on the command prompt, except rather than clicking on folders to open them, we're going to actually navigate there using commands. So first things first, what is our working directory? As I'm sure you can probably guess, this. By default, command prompt contains the working directory. So my working directory right now is C:/users/Doug. Now, with this in mind, if I want to open up this example.txt file using a relative path rather than an absolute one, I need to specify how to get there from my working directory. So rather than doing c:/user/doug/documents/example.txt, because this first bit, the first three directories there, are my working directory, I can shortcut that. And the way you do this is you type a single dot. So dot, just one dot, represents your working directory. So if I say dot slash, this means from my working directory, go to my documents folder, and from there, access example.txt. ./documents/example.txt. With my working directory set to C users Doug, incidentally, this folder that is open whenever you launch command prompt for the first time, this is what's called your user's home directory. It's the directory that contains all of your personal files. And incidentally, folder and directory mean the same thing. They're effectively synonyms. Directory is the more formal term. Folder is the more casual one. As you've probably noticed, I use the terms interchangeably. So this is the absolute path. This is the relative path with my working directory set to c/users/Doug. In the last video, we didn't use any dots either. The fact of the matter is that relative paths are used so frequently that what you can do is replace the dot slash with nothing, like that, and command prompt will know what you mean. So if you intend to use a relative path, you can either clarify it with a dot slash, like we see right here, or just simply type the path, neglecting the dot slash, and command prompt will figure it out. The distinguishing factor between absolute and relative effectively is that an absolute path starts with a drive letter, c:/, and a relative path does not. So it can be either a dot slash or just go for it. One other thing that's probably worth pointing out at this point is that most terminal environments are going to support something called tab completion that can make your life a lot easier here. So if I say type and I say docu, so I type the first bit of documents and then hit the tab key, command prompt will autocomplete the rest of it for me. So effectively what command prompt does is it knows what my working directory is. It knows that I'm typing in a path, and so if I type enough of the file name or directory name to clarify what it is inside of my working directory, when I hit tab, it will finish the rest. And I can do the same thing here. EX tab will autocomplete example. Command prompt will actually allow you to cycle through your options if there are multiples. For example, if I just say DO, this could refer to either documents or downloads. So I can use the tab key, it'll complete the documents, and if I hit tab again, it'll cycle to downloads. And so I can cycle through my options that way. This is a convenient command prompt thing. Bash doesn't do this. Okay. So that is the basic idea of absolute and relative path names. Furthermore, every single time that you access one of these files in, say, my example.txt file here, no matter how I type it, it's always considered a path name. So at the end of the day, what my program sees is the full absolute path name. The relative path gets converted into it with some simple text substitution, right? Just take whatever is over here, put it in place of the dot. So every single program that accepts a file as input is going to be looking for a path name. This is really important. It allows you for a lot of flexibility when it comes to specifying files. Because we're going to be using relative paths quite a lot, let's discuss a little bit about the working directory. So we've already said what it is, and you can see it right here on your prompt. However, you can actually customize your prompt. So it's possible to change your prompt in such a way that this no longer appears. We'll see how to actually customize the prompt a little bit later, but bottom line is we need a way independent of the fact that it just so happens to be here to see what the working directory is. And the way that we're going to do that on command prompt is with a command called cd. Now, cd is actually short for change directory. We're going to see that functionality in just a moment, but on command prompt, it serves double duty. If I run the cd command with no arguments, just like this, it is going to write to the output buffer my current working directory and then return control to me. So if you ever, for whatever reason, don't know where you are, cd with no arguments will let you know. Be aware that cd functions very differently in this respect if you're on a Bourne shell based system, something like Linux or Mac. You'll want pwd in that case to get this functionality. I'll just point this out here because in this case the commands are the same name but they do something a little bit different. So we can use cd to determine where we are. Relative paths are useful because now I can access files in my documents folder by just saying documents/example.txt, for example. But if I were to be doing a lot of work out of my documents folder, it still is a little bit annoying to have to type documents at the beginning of every single thing. So we can actually use cd, change directory, to change our working directory. And the way we do this is we type cd space, and then we type a path name for the directory that we would like our new working directory to be. So we're going to change our directory to whatever the specified one is. In this case, if I wanted to change my directory into my documents, I would say cd documents. And as you can see, my prompt has updated to include the word documents. When I run cd with no arguments, we see my working directory also has been updated there. And now I can refer to example.txt just straight by typing example.txt. No, because it isn't contained within my working directory, I don't have to add anything to the front. I can just use the file name. Equivalently, I can also say /example.txt because those are the same. And I can also still use that absolute path that we saw earlier. Here using tab completion to speed the process up a little bit. There we go. So all three of these forms with my working directory set to here refer to the same file. Three different ways to specify it. All right. So now, what if I wanted to change my working directory back to my home directory? So if I wanted to go back to C users Doug. This is something that can be a little bit tricky for novices with this. The first and most common attempt that I see people try to do is this. I want to go back to Doug, so I'm going to say cd Doug. And of course, that does not work. If that's your first thought, don't feel badly. Most people go down this route. But we actually already know why this won't work, and we already know what we need to type. So if it's not immediately obvious to you why this doesn't work and what we're supposed to do, I highly encourage you to pause the video right now and think about it for a few minutes. You know everything that you need to know to figure this out. There's no new content coming. Okay, so now I'm going to spoil the answer. Remember how this works. cd takes as an argument the path name to a directory. So when I say cd Doug, remember that's a relative path name. That's actually saying ./Doug. And remember that this dot is going to expand out to my working directory. So when I say cd Doug, what I'm actually telling the computer to do is cd into C:/users Doug documents Doug, which doesn't exist. Where do I want to actually tell the computer to go? Well, I want it to go to C users Doug. So if I want the computer to go to C users Doug, I tell the computer to go to C users Doug. Absolute path. Remember, with an absolute path, you can go and access anywhere on the system you want as long as you know the full absolute path to that thing. Incidentally, when you're using CD, you can leave the slash off or on. This trailing backslash here doesn't actually do anything. So don't let that catch you off guard. With that said, using the absolute path to go backwards does require a bit of typing, so there is a shortcut. There is a shortcut to doing this. I'm going to go back to Documents. Every directory on the system, with the exception of the root directory, has what's called a parent. The parent directory is the folder which contains the directory that you're inside of right now. So for example, I am in C users Doug documents, right? Documents is my working directory. The parent of this working directory is C users Doug. This is the absolute path name for the directory which contains the one that I'm currently inside of. So when I want to go backwards, what I want to do in practice is go from my working directory back to my working directory's parent. On most command line environments, you can represent the parent of your directory by using two dots. So if I say cd ... like this, that tells me to go back to my working directory's parent. And as you can see, it has the effect of stripping the last segment off of my working directory. You can actually chain multiple dots together if you'd like. So if I want to go back to users, I can do cd ... slash ... just like this. That's going to take me back to users. I can do it again, cd ... go back to C. Now when you're at root, any further application of cd ... doesn't actually do anything because there's no way to go further back when you're at root. That's as far back as it goes. Root has no parent. But cd ... is a very useful trick for going backwards. So let me go back to here. Like so. Notice I did not start this with a C:/, which means I just used a relative path name for CD to go to my documents folder. So now if we know where something is, we can access it. And if we know where a directory is, we can make that our working directory to make it easier to access the stuff inside of it. Important question though, how do we actually figure out where the hell things are? We saw with File Explorer how when I navigate to a working directory in File Explorer, I can actually see what's inside of it. And that's a very useful piece of information to have. On command prompt, there's a command for that. The dir, or directory command, will allow you to list out the contents of a directory. Per usual, it will accept a path name to a directory as an argument. So if I want to see the contents of my working directory, I can say dir, and then how do I represent my working directory? Dot. Dir dot. And this is going to show me the contents of C users Doug documents. This is an operation that is done sufficiently often that there's a shortcut baked in for this as well. Just like we can leave off the dot when we're specifying a relative path, we can actually leave off the dot when I'm calling dir. So if I call dir with no arguments whatsoever, it does the same thing. Now if I wanted to see the contents of my home directory, not my documents, my home, how could I do that? There are many ways to accomplish that task. I could do an absolute path if I were capable of typing. dir C users Doug. There we go. Use the contents of my home directory. I can use a relative path. Given my current working directory of C users Doug documents, the one I want, C users Doug, is documents as parent. So dir ... I kind of flashed through real quick. dir ... this guy will get you what you want. Or, if you wanted to, I can make C users dug into my working directory, cd dot dot, and now run dir with no arguments. There are a million different ways to do the same thing. And as you start to learn more and more commands, the number of options that you have increases even more. Hopefully I'm getting that point across. Now, one of the trickiest things to master about command line is this whole path name shenanigans. The important thing to remember with pretty much any command that accepts a path name is that you can use absolute and relative interchangeably. So as an example, I currently have my working directory set to C users Doug documents programming. And inside of this directory is a file, example.lua. It's a little Lua program that I've been working on. We'll ignore the fact that it has a size of 0 bytes. I'm working on it, I swear. Staring at a blank text editor screen counts as work. Not really. Anyway, I also have a backups directory contained here. So in my documents folder, I have a folder called backups. Now, it's good practice as you are working on things to make regular backup copies of the file that you're working on. In case you accidentally make a change and can't undo it or whatever, you have something to roll back to. There are really good and effective ways of doing this using, say, source change management systems or things like that, but bare minimum is you can use the copy command to do this. So what I want to do is I want to take my example.lua file and place it inside of my backups folder. I can do this in one command from right where I am. Can you think about what that command would be? Okay. Answer time. Copy. We want to use the copy command to make a copy of a file. And we want to copy example.lua. Now we want this to go into the backups directory. But remember, backups is not in my working directory, it's back in documents. So if I run copy lua backups like this, what do you think is going to happen? I don't actually get an error, but what I do is I create a copy of my file, example.lua, called backups. That's no good. I want to put it inside of the backups directory. So I need to do // like that. You can see one file is copied. And now if I list out the contents of backups, you can see example.lua is right there. So I have successfully made a copy. Remember, path names. Just as a general note on move and copy, by the way, while we're here, this kind of demonstrates a little bit of the implicit functionality of those commands. Whereas, there we go. This versus this. If the second argument here represents the destination, so where you're creating the copy or where you're moving the file to, if the destination doesn't exist, there's nothing at that path name, then the move or copy command is going to put the copy or the move the file to that path name exactly. So when I said copy example lua backups, it took my example.lua file, created a copy of it called backups within my working directory. However, when the destination is a path name for a directory that actually exists, as is the case down here, it takes the file and places it inside of that directory with the name that it currently has. So move and copy are quite intelligent with respect to that. But it can cause a little bit of confusion when you're just getting started, especially if you accidentally provide an invalid name for a directory. The command will just create a file with that name. As another example, let's say that you just downloaded a file on your web browser and you're sitting here in a command prompt doing something, and your web browser places the file in your downloads folder. With a single command, I can take that file and I can put it right here so that it's immediately accessible inside of my working directory. All you have to do is say move, and now my downloads folder is pretty far back the tree, so I'm just going to go ahead and use an absolute path for it. you could use a relative path as well with multiple dot dots, but absolute path is a lot simpler to conceptualize here. So I'm going to specify I want my downloads folder, and then my file is called testcode.r right there. And I want to place that file in my working directory. So dot. Remember, one dot is your working directory. So I run that command, and I have just copied, or in this case, moved that file into my working directory. This sort of thing is really handy. I can't tell you how many times I see students who are just learning the command line do something where they'll download the file, and then they'll open up File Explorer and they'll copy and paste from File Explorer into the directory that they have open on command prompt. And they're doing a ton of completely unnecessary work because you can use a single move command to just take the file and put it right where you are. So these are just some examples of using relative and absolute paths to move things around. Now, as a final note, for completeness' sake, there are commands that will allow you to create and delete directories as well, and these are probably worth discussing. They are mkdir to make a directory and rmdir to remove a directory. So if I wanted to create a directory, let's create a directory for my R code and a directory for my Lua code. So I'm going to go ahead and say mkdir R and mkdir Lua. So as you can see, I've just created two new directories in my working directory called R and Lua. And now I can move my relevant programs into those directories. There's actually, in the next video, we'll talk about some faster and more efficient ways to move lots of files around. But for now, I'm just going to do this and that. And so as you can see, we now have nothing in here. And let's go ahead and just delete this backups file that I created accidentally earlier, like that. And I was, of course, using tab completion throughout to make for less typing. I don't type all that fast. I just use the tab key a lot. So that's how you create directories, is with mkdir. And what if you wanted to remove a directory? Well, let's delete that R directory. rmdir allows you to delete directories. However, you'll note that I am not allowed to delete a directory which contains stuff inside of it. Again, the directory is not empty. So if I want to delete my R directory here, what I would have to do is actually go in and delete everything inside of it using the del command. Now I can go back and successfully delete the directory. So that's using rmdir. Again, you'll want to be careful about deleting stuff on the command prompt because once it's gone, it's gone. But as you get more comfortable with this, del and rmdir can become quite useful. All right, so in conclusion, in this article, we've discussed two core concepts, the relative and the absolute path name, which are ways of specifying not only the name of a file, but where it is located. Every file on the system has a unique path name. All programs are expecting path names. If you use an absolute path name, that is the sequence of instructions to get to the file from the root. If you use a relative path name, that is the sequence of directions to get to the file from your working directory, which is the directory displayed right here on the prompt by default. We saw three commands: cd, which allows you to display your working directory when called with no arguments; update your working directory when called with the path name to a valid directory. We also saw the mkdir command, which will create directories with a specified path name, and the rmdir command, which will delete directories that are empty with a specified path name. The contents of this video are very important, and it will take a fair bit of time to gain a level of proficiency with them. So it's worth practicing this. We saw a couple of examples with move and copy of how you can use path names to your advantage. Try and take advantage of opportunities like that as they arise while you're using the computer. It's great practice. It will help you understand how this all works. Now in the next video, we're going to move on and we're going to see how we can take the commands that we've learned, combine options and something called globbing, which is a very strange name, but we'll see. It's very useful. And using options and globbing, special arguments and ways of formatting arguments to extend their functionality even further. So I hope that you found this video interesting and useful, and I'll see you over there in the next one.